Hello, this is Kimberly at Singing for Your Soul, and welcome to video number 4 in our breath series. So the entire first 3 videos I've barely mentioned singing, even though this breath series is meant to eventually get to the point of helping you with your breathing for singing. So we're going to talk right now about the physiological process of how sound is made and why the breath is so important in that process, okay? So let's talk about it. In our throat, we have the vocal cords, and they are actually stretched across the throat horizontally, not vertically, right? They are this way. A lot of times people think they're this way, and probably because they've seen pictures in textbooks and it looks like they're sticking up and down, but they're actually lying across the windpipe. And the vocal cords open, they're actually connected, just like my fingers, they're connected at the front and they open up to the back when you take a breath in or when you breathe out. So if I go, my vocal cords open up, and when I breathe out, they're still open, okay? There's a complex process that causes the vocal cords to move and vibrate, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to only compare it to how the breath is affecting the vocal cords. So when we breathe in, air goes directly through our mouth and or nose and down the back of the throat, through the vocal cords, down the trachea, which is the windpipe, and into the lungs. And then when we make sound, there's air pressure that builds up underneath, in the lungs and in the trachea, underneath the vocal cords, that causes vibration to happen. And that's specifically what I want to talk about today, okay? So if your vocal cords are closed and they're in a position where they're ready to start to make sound, what happens is you get a pressurized environment. All this air wants to go out of you, right? The carbon dioxide is like, it's time to leave the building, and the oxygen is like, yeah, and we're going to come back in when you leave, right? But you've got all this air pressure, and the way I like to describe it is that for singing, we often want to turn our bodies into a Coke bottle that's been shaken up and the lid's still on, and that Coke bottle is under pressure, right? If you take that lid and you open it just a little bit, you're going to start to get some fizz come out of that bottle. So we want to turn our torso into an under pressure Coke bottle, so to speak, so that the vocal cords can vibrate together. The reason that we want to do this is because of the action of the vocal cords. When you start to make sound, in fact, just take a moment and put your hand on your throat and go, ah, you feel all that nice vibration in your throat? That's your little happy vocal cords going to town. They're vibrating together to create that sound. The breath pressure directly affects how the vocal cords are vibrating. This is how it happens. There's this thing called the Bernoulli effect. They actually use the Bernoulli effect in a lot of different applications. For instance, jet airplanes fly because of the Bernoulli effect. There's greater air pressure above the wings than below the wings, and that greater air pressure actually sucks the plane up. Okay, so it creates a sucking. And in the throat, the breath flow creates this push-pull action. It sucks and then it pushes. So the vocal cords are in here, and when air pressure builds up under the cords, eventually enough air pressure will build up that they will be pushed apart. This puff of air pushes the cords apart, and then the air rushes through, right? I'm free, woohoo! And as it's rushing through, it creates suction, which sucks the cords back together. They get pushed open, and then they get sucked back together, pushed open, sucked back together. That's happening about 300 times per second, more or less, depending upon what kind of sound you're making and what part of your range you're in. But moving pretty fast. That vibration is going quickly, as you can tell when you feel your throat when you're making a sound. That's a pretty quick vibration that's happening, right? So the amount of breath pressure that is in the torso is going to directly affect how the cords vibrate, because if you have less pressure, you're going to get a breathier sound. The cords are not going to be pulled as tightly together. If you have higher pressure, that air means business, and it's going to have a more distinct effect on pushing the chords apart and sucking them back together, which is going to create a louder sound. So if I go, I don't have very much breath pressure at this point because there's no resistance to it. It's just all flowing out. But if I go, ha, now I have some resistance happening. I've got some good breath pressure in my torso, and the chords are acting in a way that's going to give you more sound. Now, you're going to want to breathe possibly slightly differently depending upon what kinds of sounds you're making, right? Sometimes you want a breathy tone, sometimes you want a fuller tone. But the point is that the vocal cords are vibrating directly in relationship to the breath, and that's why it's so important for singing, to really understand the breathing. You can protect your voice by knowing how to properly breathe, because the breath is really the pump that makes the voice go. So if you've got a good support system underneath you, that is really going to help ensure that your voice is functioning in a really healthy way. Okay? I hope that's helpful, and if you're interested in more of this kind of information, please go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube page, like us on Facebook, head to the website, check us out, get on the emailing list if that's something that really is interesting to you, and I wish you well and happy singing. Bye-bye.